The human research vessel Wanderer moved slowly through the darkness of space. Its mission was simple: map new worlds and study alien life. Captain Lisa Morgan sat in her command chair, watching the stars drift past on the viewing screen. Her crew of 12 worked quietly at their stations. They had been in space for 3 months now, and everyone was getting used to the routine. The ship approached a planet called Kepler 442b. It was the 4th planet they had visited this year. Daniel Price, the chief science officer, scanned the surface with his instruments. He was looking for signs of life, any indication that something lived down there. Most planets they found were empty, just rocks and ice floating in the void. But this planet was different. Daniel sat up straight in his chair, his eyes widening as he studied the readings. He called out to the captain, excitement clear in his voice. There were heat signatures on the surface, large ones. The pattern suggested big animals, possibly hunters at the top of the food chain. Finding predators meant the planet had a complex ecosystem, which made it valuable for study. Karen Hughes was monitoring the communication systems when she picked up something strange. Weak signals were coming from the planet's surface, artificial signals made by technology. Someone was down there and their equipment was damaged. The signals flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. Lisa Morgan made a decision that would change everything. Protocol said they should report the signals and move on. But someone might be dying down there. She ordered a landing party to investigate. 3 people would go: Sergeant Nicole Rivers, a Marine assigned to protect the crew; Peter Grant, their xenobiologist who studied alien life; and Christopher Lane, their medical officer. The 3 humans descended through the atmosphere in their small landing craft. The coordinates led them to a dense forest region. Trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves a strange purple color. The air was thick and humid. They moved carefully through the undergrowth until they found what they were looking for. A spaceship lay half buried in the forest floor. It had crashed weeks ago, maybe longer. The hull was cracked open like a broken egg. Scorch marks covered the metal surface. This was no accident. Someone had shot this ship down. Peter scanned the wreckage with his handheld device. The ship belonged to the Vrelnathi, a species known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors and hunters. They were large reptilian beings standing nearly 8 feet tall with powerful bodies built for killing. The Vrelnathi kept to themselves and distrusted other species. They believed strength was everything. Nicole led the way into the crashed ship, her weapon ready. The interior was dark and smelled of decay. They moved through twisted corridors until they heard a sound. It was a low growl, deep and threatening. Nicole raised her hand, signaling the others to stop. In the main cabin, they found him. A Vrelnathi warrior lay on the floor, his body covered in wounds. Blood had dried in dark pools around him, but he was alive, barely. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. And he was not alone. 3 small Vrelnathi huddled behind their father. They were juveniles, children. Their scales were dull and lifeless. Their eyes were sunken deep into their skulls. They looked like skeletons covered in skin. Nicole had seen starvation before during her military service. These cubs were dying. The adult Vrelnathi moved despite his injuries. He positioned himself between the humans and his young. His translator device was damaged but still working. Broken words came through. "Stay back, protect my young." His name was Krathnix, and even dying he was dangerous. Nicole held up her empty hands, trying to show they meant no harm. But Krathnix did not trust easily. His species viewed most other races as either food or enemies. His eyes, yellow and predatory, watched every movement the humans made. Peter moved slowly, scanning the area with his instruments. The news was bad. The local animals had learned to avoid this place because of Krathnix's presence. Even injured, he was a threat to the wildlife. The cubs had not eaten in at least 10 days. Their father was too wounded to hunt. He had been trying to keep them alive through willpower alone. Christopher examined the cubs from a distance using his medical scanner. The smallest one was a female with distinctive golden markings on her scales. She was the weakest of the 3. As they watched, she collapsed onto the floor. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Krathnix made a sound that cut through the air like a knife. It was a keen of mourning, a sound of pure grief. He knew he was failing. A hunter's duty was to provide for his family. Without food, his cubs would die, and there was nothing he could do about it. Nicole felt something twist in her chest. She was a soldier, trained to follow orders and complete missions. She had seen death before, watched comrades fall in combat, but this was different. These were children. They had done nothing wrong. They were simply caught in circumstances beyond their control. Peter spoke quietly, outlining their options. They could report this to the Vrelnathi authorities and leave. The proper channels would handle it. Or they could try to help directly. But interfering with another species was complicated. The Vrelnathi had strict honor codes. Accepting help was seen as weakness, and weakness brought shame. Nicole looked at the golden-marked cub lying on the floor. The small chest barely moved. Time was running out. She made a decision without asking permission. She reached into her pack and pulled out her emergency rations. They were protein bars designed for human consumption, but the nutritional content might work for carnivores. She took a step forward. Krathnix growled, a warning rumble from deep in his chest. Nicole stopped but did not back away. She placed the ration packs on the ground between them. Then she slowly backed up, her hands still visible and empty. "For your cubs," she said through her translator. No strings attached. Krathnix stared at the food, then at Nicole, then at his dying children. His pride warred with his love. In his culture, accepting charity was disgraceful. But watching his cubs starve was worse. The smallest cub made a weak sound, barely a whisper. The adult Vrelnathi closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. He dragged himself forward, his wounds reopening with the effort. Blood left a trail behind him. He reached out with one clawed hand and pulled the ration packs closer to his cubs. Nicole felt tears threaten to fall, but she blinked them away. She nodded once to Krathnix, a gesture of respect. Then she and her team withdrew, giving the family privacy. As they walked back to their landing craft, Peter asked what they would do next. Nicole did not answer immediately. She was thinking about 3 starving cubs and their dying father. She was thinking about duty and compassion and what it meant to be human. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm. They would come back. They would bring more food, and they would find a way to help that preserved Krathnix's dignity, because that was what humans did. When they saw someone in need, they helped. Even if that someone had claws and fangs and could easily kill them. Even if that someone was supposed to be a monster. Nicole returned to the Wanderer and went straight to Captain Morgan's office. She explained everything she had seen, the dying warrior, the starving cubs, the desperate situation. Lisa Morgan listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with each detail. The captain called an emergency meeting. The senior officers gathered in the conference room. Daniel Price was there, along with Karen Hughes and several others. They sat around the table while Nicole stood and gave her report. When she finished, silence filled the room. Daniel spoke first. His position was clear and practical. They should contact the Vrelnathi authorities and report the crash. Then they should leave. Getting involved in another species' affairs was dangerous. The Vrelnathi were proud and easily offended. Helping them without permission could create an interstellar incident. Karen disagreed. She pointed out the obvious problem with Daniel's plan. By the time Vrelnathi ships arrived, the cubs would be dead. They had days at most, maybe only hours. The smallest one was already failing. Waiting for official channels meant watching children die when they had the power to prevent it. Nicole stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back. She had served in the military for 15 years. She knew about following orders and respecting chain of command, but she also knew about right and wrong. She had seen too much death in her career. She could not stand by and let those cubs starve, not when she had food to share. Lisa Morgan rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of command. Every choice had consequences. If they helped and the Vrelnathi took offense, it could damage diplomatic relations. Earth was still new to the galactic community. They could not afford to make powerful enemies. But if they did nothing, how could they call themselves civilized? The captain made her decision. They would offer assistance, but only if Krathnix accepted it. They would not force help on someone who did not want it. That would be disrespectful, another form of violence. Nicole would return with medical supplies and food. If the Vrelnathi warrior refused, they would respect his choice and leave. Nicole gathered what she needed. Medical equipment, water purification tablets, and most importantly, food. She packed every protein ration she had, enough to feed the cubs for several days. Christopher prepared medical supplies that could be used remotely, including a small drone that could deliver medicine. They returned to the crash site 8 hours later. Krathenix was still alive, still positioned between his cubs and any potential threat. The cubs had eaten the rations Nicole left earlier. They looked slightly better, their eyes a bit brighter, but they were still desperately thin. Nicole approached slowly, making no sudden movements. She spoke through her translator, keeping her voice calm and respectful. She explained that they wanted to help. They had more food, medicine for his wounds, water. All free, no payment required. They simply wanted the cubs to survive. Krathenix refused immediately. His voice was weak but firm. In Vrelnathi culture, a hunter provided for his family. Always. Accepting food from others, especially during a moment of weakness, brought shame to the entire bloodline. His ancestors would turn away from him in disgrace. He would rather die with honor than live with shame. Nicole understood. She had studied enough alien cultures to know that different species had different values. What seemed like simple kindness to humans might be seen as an insult to others. But understanding did not change the reality. The cubs were dying. Honor would not fill their stomachs. She sat down on the ground 30 feet away from Krathenix and his family. She made herself comfortable, showing she was not a threat. Then she opened one of her own ration packs and began to eat. She made sure Krathenix could see her, could smell the food. She ate slowly, deliberately. When she finished, she placed several unopened ration packs on the ground between them. She stood up and stretched, acting casual. Then she spoke, her words carefully chosen. "I need to rest," she said. "I will leave my supplies here while I walk around. What happens to them is not my concern. If they are gone when I return, well, perhaps the local animals took them." It was a fiction, a polite lie, but it served a purpose. Krathenix would not have to accept charity. He could simply take what had been abandoned. His honor would remain intact. He would not be accepting help. He would be scavenging, which was acceptable for a hunter in desperate circumstances. Nicole walked away, disappearing into the forest. Peter and Christopher went with her. They waited out of sight for 30 minutes. When they returned, the ration packs were gone. Krathenix would not meet Nicole's eyes, but his cubs were eating. Over the next 3 days, a routine developed. Nicole returned to the crash site every 8 hours, regular as clockwork. Each time she brought food and supplies. Each time she pretended to forget them or leave them behind accidentally. Each time Krathenix maintained the pretense that he was merely taking what careless humans had abandoned. The cubs began to recover. Their scales regained some shine. Their movements became stronger, more energetic. The golden-marked female, the one Nicole privately called Goldie, started showing curiosity about the world around her. She would watch Nicole with intelligent eyes, tilting her head like she was trying to understand this strange alien who brought food. Peter used the visits to study the crashed ship. The damage was worse than they initially thought. The engines were completely fused together, melted by the heat of weapons fire. The life support systems were failing bit by bit. The communication array was destroyed beyond any hope of repair. Even if Krathenix recovered fully, they could not fix this ship. Not without parts and equipment they did not have. Christopher worked on treating Krathenix's injuries. The warrior would not let the humans touch him, so Christopher used the medical drone. It was a small flying device that could deliver medicine and seal wounds from a distance. The drone worked slowly, carefully, following Christopher's commands. Krathenix's body was remarkably tough. His species had evolved to survive serious injuries, but he had lost too much blood. Several of his internal organs were damaged. The drone could keep him alive, could ease his pain, but it could not truly heal him. He needed surgery in a proper medical facility. He needed time to rest and recover. He had neither. On the 4th day, something changed. Nicole arrived with her usual supplies, going through the familiar routine of pretending to forget them. But this time Goldie approached her. The cub moved slowly, cautiously, her body language showing both curiosity and fear. Krathenix growled a warning from where he lay. His voice was stern, commanding, but Goldie ignored her father, driven by the fearless curiosity of youth. She came closer to Nicole, close enough to touch. Her nostrils flared as she sniffed the air, taking in the human scent. Nicole froze. She barely breathed. One wrong move could trigger a predatory response. Goldie was young, but her teeth were sharp and her claws were real. Even a cub could hurt a human badly if startled. Goldie extended her neck, bringing her head near Nicole's hand. Her forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Then she made a sound, a chirping noise that seemed almost playful. It reminded Nicole of the sound baby birds made. Innocent. Trusting. Tears pricked Nicole's eyes. This was a child. A child with scales and claws, yes, but still a child. A being that should be playing and learning and growing up safe. Not fighting to survive in a crashed ship, watching their father slowly die. Krathnix watched this interaction with his predatory yellow eyes. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then his translator crackled to life with a question that caught Nicole off guard. Why do you do this? His voice was rough, weakened by injury and exhaustion. We are nothing to your kind. Humans and Vrelnathi have no bonds. We are not allies. Why waste your resources on strangers? Nicole thought carefully about her answer. She wanted to get it right. To explain something that felt obvious to her but might not make sense to a warrior culture. She looked at Goldie, then at the other two cubs, then at their father. Because they are children, she said simply. Because you are a parent trying to protect them. Where I come from, that matters. It matters more than what species you are or what you look like. Krathnix made a sound that might have been laughter, though it was bitter. Humans are weak. Your species lacks claws, fangs, natural armor. You have no weapons built into your bodies. You are prey animals who learn to use tools. By all rights, you should have been eaten by predators long ago. Nicole smiled slightly. Maybe we are weak by your standards, but we survived anyway. We learned to work together, to help each other. We learned that strength is not just about who can bite the hardest. The Vrelnathi warrior fell silent. In his culture, such thoughts were considered foolish. Strength was everything. The strong survived and the weak perished. That was the natural order. But he could not argue with results. This weak, clawless human had saved his children when he, a mighty hunter, could not. Peter emerged from the ship wreckage, his face troubled. He had found something disturbing while examining the damaged systems. The crash was not an accident. The blast patterns were consistent with military-grade weapons. Someone had deliberately shot down Krathnix's ship. Someone had tried to kill him and his family. The question was why. And the answer, Peter suspected, would complicate everything. The situation changed drastically when Karen detected a new ship entering the star system. It was a Vrelnathi warship, much larger than the Wanderer. Its weapon systems were active, scanning the area. Karen immediately reported this to Captain Morgan. The warship sent a message. It identified itself as the Talon of Honor, a military vessel of the Vrelnathi Dominion. They were searching for a crashed ship and a criminal named Krathnix. The message was formal and cold. They demanded any information about his whereabouts. Lisa Morgan felt her stomach tighten. Criminal? They had been helping a wanted fugitive. She requested more information, asking what crimes Krathnix had committed. The response made everything worse. Krathnix was accused of treason against the Vrelnathi Dominion. The charges were serious: theft of classified government research, assault on military personnel, and fleeing from justice. The Dominion wanted him returned immediately to face execution. His 3 cubs would be taken into state custody. Captain Morgan made a difficult decision. She needed to hear Krathnix's side of the story before doing anything else. She set up a video communication link, allowing the injured warrior to speak from the crash site. Nicole stood beside him, translating when his damaged equipment failed. What Krathnix told them changed everything. He spoke slowly, his strength fading, but his words were clear. He had been a decorated warrior, respected in his society, but he was also a scientist studying genetics and biology. His work had given him access to classified government facilities. That was where he discovered the truth. The Vrelnathi Dominion's ruling class was conducting experiments on lower caste cubs. They were trying to create genetically engineered super soldiers, warriors stronger and more obedient than natural-born Vrelnathi. The experiments failed more often than they succeeded. Hundreds of cubs had died in the process. Krathnix's mate had been a lower caste Vrelnathi. When she learned about the experiments, she tried to expose them. She gathered evidence and prepared to go public. But before she could, she disappeared. Her body was found 3 days later. Her death ruled an accident. Krathnix knew better. He knew his mate had been murdered to keep her silent. And he knew his 3 cubs were scheduled for the program. Because they were half lower caste, they were considered expendable, perfect subjects for experimentation. He could not let that happen. He stole all the research data, every file he could access. Then he took his cubs and ran. He hoped to reach a neutral world where he could present his evidence to the Galactic Council. Instead, the Dominion's forces caught up with him. They shot down his ship, intending to kill everyone aboard and destroy the evidence. By luck or fate, he survived the crash. But his ship's data cores were damaged. He could not transmit the evidence. He could only wait and hope someone would find them before his cubs starved. Captain Morgan listened to this story with a growing sense of dread. This was not a simple matter of returning a criminal. This was a political situation involving genocide, government corruption, and cover-ups. If Krathnix was telling the truth, and she believed he was, then the Dominion was committing atrocities against its own people. But proving it would be difficult. And dangerous. The Dominion was powerful. They had warships and political influence. Earth was still new to galactic politics. Making enemies of the Vrilnathi could have serious consequences. Krathnix looked directly at the camera, his yellow eyes intense despite his weakness. "They will kill me," he said flatly. "I accept this. My life is forfeit. But my cubs are innocent. They know nothing of what I have done. I ask not for myself, but for them. Please do not let them be taken. Do not let them die in those laboratories." The transmission ended. Captain Morgan sat in her command chair, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. The Talon of Honor sent another message. They gave the Wanderer 6 hours to surrender Krathnix and his cubs. If they refused, there would be consequences. Nicole was in the cargo bay when she heard the news. She had been preparing supplies for another trip to the crash site. Her hand stopped moving. 6 hours. That was all the time they had. She went to the captain's office without being summoned. She walked in and stood at attention. Lisa Morgan looked up from her desk, exhaustion clear on her face. "I'm going to do something that will probably get me court-martialed," Nicole said. "I want you to know that in advance. What you do about it is your choice." The captain leaned back in her chair. "What are you planning, Sergeant?" "I am bringing Krathnix and his cubs aboard this ship," Nicole replied. "Then we are going to run for the Arcturus Gate. It is 3 days away. There is a Galactic Council outpost there. We can request asylum and present Krathnix's evidence." Daniel Price, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the office. "The Talon of Honor will catch us long before we reach the gate. It is a warship. We are a research vessel. This is suicide," Nicole nodded. "Maybe, but they might hesitate to destroy a human ship. Earth has mutual defense treaties with other species. Attacking us could bring consequences the Dominion does not want." Karen spoke up through the communication system. "Even if that stops them from destroying us, they can disable our engines and board us. Then we would be prisoners along with Krathnix." "That is possible," Nicole admitted. "But doing nothing guarantees those cubs die. I have seen a lot of death in my career. I am tired of watching people die when I have the power to help." Lisa Morgan studied her sergeant. Nicole was a good soldier, one of the best. She followed orders and completed her missions. But she also had a conscience, and right now, that conscience was telling her to act. The captain had a choice. She could order Nicole to stand down. She could surrender Krathnix and his cubs to the Dominion. It would be the safe choice, the sensible choice. Or she could do something monumentally stupid and possibly heroic. She thought about why she had joined the exploration service. It was not for money or glory. It was because she believed humanity had something valuable to offer the galaxy. She believed humans could make things better, but beliefs meant nothing if you did not act on them when it mattered. "Mr. Price," she said quietly, "plot a course to Arcturus Gate. Maximum speed." Daniel opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He nodded and left to carry out the order. Karen's voice came through the speakers. "Captain, are you sure about this?" "No," Lisa Morgan admitted, "but I am doing it anyway. Send out a distress call on all human frequencies. Let everyone know we have a situation. Maybe someone will come help." Nicole felt relief wash through her. She saluted and turned to leave, ready to retrieve Krathnix and the cubs. "Sergeant Rivers," the captain called after her. Nicole stopped and looked back. "If we survive this, there will be an inquiry. You might face charges for what you have done." "I know, ma'am," Nicole replied. "It is worth it." Within the hour, Nicole and her team were loading Krathnix and his 3 cubs onto a transport. The warrior was too weak to walk. They had to carry him on a stretcher. The cubs stayed close to their father, frightened by all the activity. Goldie recognized Nicole and moved closer to her. The cub made that chirping sound again, seeking comfort from the familiar human. Nicole placed a hand on the golden scales, feeling the warmth of the young body beneath her palm. I will keep you safe, she whispered. I promise. They brought the family aboard the Wanderer. The cargo bay was the only space large enough to accommodate them. Christopher set up medical equipment to monitor Krathnik's vital signs. Peter secured the stolen data, copying it to multiple storage devices in case something happened. Captain Morgan gave the order. The Wanderer broke orbit and accelerated toward the Arcturus gate. Behind them, the Talon of Honor detected their movement and immediately gave chase. The race had begun. 3 days to reach safety, 3 days with a warship hunting them, 3 days that would determine whether Forvrelnathi lived or died. Nicole sat with the cubs in the cargo bay. They huddled together, scared and confused. Their whole world had been turned upside down. Their father was dying. They were on a strange ship surrounded by aliens. Everything must have seemed terrifying to them. She pulled out more ration packs and offered them food. The cubs ate mechanically without enthusiasm. They were fed, but they were not comforted. Food alone could not fix what was broken. Goldie pressed against Nicole's side. The human wrapped an arm around the cub, holding her close. It was an awkward embrace. Goldie was large and covered in scales. But Nicole held her anyway, trying to provide some sense of safety in a frightening situation. Krathnik watched from his stretcher. His breathing was labored, each breath a struggle. He called Nicole over with a weak gesture. You risk much for us, he said through his translator. Why? Nicole thought about her answer. Because it is the right thing to do, she said finally. Because those cubs deserve a chance at life. Because standing by and doing nothing would make me less human. Krathnik closed his eyes. Perhaps I have misjudged your species. Perhaps weakness and strength are not so simple. The ship shuddered as it pushed its engines to maximum power. Somewhere behind them, the Talon of Honor was closing in. The hunt was on. The Wanderer raced through space at maximum speed. The engines hummed with strain, pushed beyond their normal limits. On the bridge, Captain Morgan watched the tactical display. The red dot representing the Talon of Honor was getting closer with each passing hour. Amy Cross sat at the pilot's station, her hands moving across the controls with practiced ease. She was the best pilot on the crew, which was why Lisa had assigned her to this position. If anyone could keep them ahead of a warship, it was Amy. But even the best pilot could not change physics. The Talon of Honor was built for pursuit. It was faster and more powerful. Simple mathematics said it would catch them long before they reached the Arcturus gate. Karen sent out continuous distress signals on all human frequencies. She broadcast their situation, their position, and their desperate flight toward safety. The messages went out into the void, traveling at the speed of light. But space was vast. Help, if it came, might arrive too late. In the cargo bay, Christopher worked frantically to stabilize Krathnik. The warrior's condition was deteriorating. The stress of being moved had reopened his wounds. His blood pressure was dropping. His organs were shutting down one by one. The 3 cubs sensed something was wrong with their father. They gathered around him, making soft, keening sounds. It was a mourning song, sung by Vrelnathi when death approached. The sound was haunting and beautiful and heartbreaking. Nicole sat with them, not knowing how to comfort creatures so different from herself. She held Goldie close. The other 2 cubs, both males, pressed against her sides. They were seeking warmth and reassurance from the only adult who seemed able to help them. Peter was hunched over a computer terminal, examining the stolen data. What he found made his blood run cold. The files contained detailed records of experiments performed on hundreds of cubs. Genetic modifications, surgical procedures, chemical treatments. Most of the subjects died within weeks. Those who survived were often mentally damaged, their personalities erased by the process. The Dominion had been running this program for years. They were trying to create perfect soldiers, beings with no fear and no hesitation, warriors who would follow orders without question. The cost in young lives was staggering. Peter called Captain Morgan down to look at the evidence. She studied the files in silence, her face growing pale. This was worse than genocide. This was systematic torture and murder of children. We have to get this to the Council, Peter said urgently. The galaxy needs to see what the Dominion is doing. This cannot be allowed to continue, Lisa nodded grimly. First, we have to survive long enough to deliver it. The Talon of Honor sent a message. It appeared on the main viewing screen. War leader Zekthara, the commander of the warship, stared at them with cold eyes. His scales were dark red, almost black. His voice was hard as stone. You are harboring a criminal and stolen property, he said. Return them immediately or your ship will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. Captain Morgan composed her response carefully. She explained that they were transporting political refugees to neutral territory. She cited galactic law regarding asylum seekers. She pointed out that destroying a civilian research vessel would be a violation of multiple treaties. Zekthara was unimpressed. The Cubs are not refugees. They are Vrelnathi property, claimed by the state. The criminal Krathnix has poisoned your minds with lies. He is a traitor who murdered his superiors and stole classified information. Justice demands his return. These are children, Lisa replied firmly. Not property. We are taking them to safety. We will present evidence of crimes against them to the Galactic Council. If Krathnix has lied, the truth will show that. The transmission ended. War leader Zekthara did not respond further. Instead, the Talon of Honor opened fire. The first shots were warning blasts designed to disable rather than destroy. Energy weapons lit up the darkness of space. Amy threw the Wanderer into evasive maneuvers. The ship twisted and turned, dancing between deadly beams of concentrated energy. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. The shields absorbed some hits, but they were not designed for combat. Each strike weakened them further. Soon they would fail completely. Nicole felt the ship shudder with each impact. She held the Cubs tighter, using her body to shield them as much as possible. Goldie whimpered in fear. The males growled, their juvenile instincts telling them to fight, but there was nothing they could fight. Krathnix tried to rise from his stretcher. He wanted to protect his young, even though he could barely move. Christopher pushed him back down gently but firmly. Stay still, the medic said. You will kill yourself if you keep moving. My Cubs, Krathnix gasped. Must protect. The sergeant is protecting them, Christopher assured him. She will not let anything happen to them. The chase continued for another hour. The Wanderer took several more hits. One struck the port engine, reducing their speed by 15%. The Talon of Honor closed the gap rapidly. Then something unexpected happened. Karen picked up new contacts on her sensors. Ships were entering the system moving fast. She identified them quickly. 3 human patrol vessels responding to the distress call. They were smaller than the Talon of Honor but heavily armed. And they were military ships designed for combat. The lead vessel sent a transmission. This is Commander Jake Palmer of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call, Wanderer. Hold your position. We are coming to assist. Hope surged through the crew. Help had arrived. They were not alone anymore. Commander Palmer sent another message. This one directed at the Talon of Honor. His voice carried authority and warning in equal measure. War leader Zekthara, you are firing on a civilian vessel under Earth's protection. Stand down immediately. Any further attacks will be considered an act of war. For the first time, the Vrelnathi commander hesitated. Destroying one research ship was one thing. Engaging 3 military vessels was another matter entirely. It would mean open conflict between the Vrelnathi Dominion and Earth. The political consequences would be enormous. But Zekthara was a warrior. He had his orders. He had his duty. And he believed in the superiority of Vrelnathi strength. The humans harbor criminals, he responded. This is an internal Dominion matter. Leave now, or face the consequences. Negative, Commander Palmer replied. We will not abandon civilians in danger. If you want them, you will have to go through us. A standoff developed. The Talon of Honor stopped firing but maintained pursuit. The 3 human patrol ships took up positions around the Wanderer, forming a protective formation. For hours, they flew together through space, a tense convoy moving toward the Arcturus Gate. In the cargo bay, Christopher noticed Krathnix's breathing becoming more labored. The warrior's eyes were losing focus. His body was giving out. They had done everything medically possible, but it was not enough. His injuries were too severe. Nicole saw it too. She had been a soldier long enough to recognize death approaching. She went to Krathnix's side, kneeling beside the stretcher. Your Cubs will be safe, she told him softly. I promise you. They will reach the gate. They will have a chance at life. Krathnix's eyes found hers. With great effort, he raised one clawed hand. Nicole hesitated, then placed her hand against his. His scales were warm beneath her palm. In our culture, he whispered, there is a ceremony, a blood bond. When one warrior saves another's family, they become guardian, protector. Will you accept this responsibility? Will you be mother to my cubs? Nicole felt tears running down her face. She looked at the three young Vrelnathi. They were watching her with their golden eyes. Waiting. Hoping. They had no one else. She thought about her life, her career, everything she had planned. She thought about the future she had imagined for herself. Then she looked at Goldie, who chirped softly and pressed against her side. Yes, Nicole said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. I will protect them. I will be their guardian. I promise you. Krathnix made a sound that might have been relief. You are not prey, he said quietly. You are hunter. Different kind. You hunt to save, not to kill. Perhaps my people could learn from yours. His breathing slowed. His eyes closed. And then peacefully he stopped breathing. The cubs began their morning song again. It echoed through the cargo bay, a sound of loss and grief. Nicole held them as they cried. She did not understand their language, but she understood their pain. Christopher checked for vital signs, then shook his head. Krathnix was gone. On the bridge, Captain Morgan received an update. The Arcturus gate was 2 hours away. The Galactic Council peacekeepers were standing by to receive them. War leader Zekthara could not pursue them into neutral space without violating multiple treaties. They were going to make it. Against all odds, they were going to survive. Lisa made an announcement over the ship's communication system. She told the crew about Krathnix's death. She told them about Nicole's promise. She told them they carried not just refugees, but family now. The crew responded with quiet determination. They had started this journey to help. They would finish it the same way. The Wanderer, escorted by 3 patrol ships, continued toward the gate. Behind them, the Talon of Honor followed but did not attack. War leader Zekthara watched the humans slip away, taking the evidence of his government's crimes with them. In the cargo bay, Nicole sat with 3 orphaned cubs. She had become a... The Wanderer crossed into neutral space and docked at the Arcturus gate station. The massive structure floated at the intersection of several major trade routes. Ships from dozens of species came and went constantly. It was truly neutral ground, protected by the Galactic Council and respected by all civilized nations. Galactic Council peacekeepers met them at the docking bay. They wore white armor and carried weapons designed to stun rather than kill. Their job was to maintain order and ensure the law was followed. Captain Morgan presented their case to the lead peacekeeper, a tall insectoid being named Click-Click-Trath. She explained everything. The crashed ship, the starving cubs, Krathnix's accusations, and the stolen data. She formally requested asylum for the 3 young Vrelnathi on behalf of Nicole Rivers, who had accepted guardianship responsibility. Click-Click-Trath listened carefully. The peacekeeper's translator turned their clicking sounds into understandable speech. This is a serious matter. The Vrelnathi Dominion will protest. They may demand the cubs be returned. Do you have evidence to support the claims of criminal experiments? Peter stepped forward with multiple data storage devices. Everything is here. Detailed records of hundreds of experiments, names, dates, procedures. The evidence is overwhelming. The peacekeeper accepted the devices. We will examine this information. In the meantime, the cubs will remain in your custody. A hearing will be scheduled within 3 days. All parties will be allowed to present their case. Nicole carried Goldie in her arms as they left the docking bay. The cub was exhausted, traumatized by everything that had happened. The 2 males walked close beside Nicole, their heads down. They had lost their father. Their whole world had collapsed. Only this strange human remained constant. The station provided temporary quarters for the Wanderer's crew. Nicole requested a large room that could accommodate her new family. The cubs needed space to move around. They were growing rapidly and would soon be even larger. The news of their arrival spread quickly through the galaxy. The story of a human sergeant feeding starving alien cubs with her own rations captured imaginations across multiple species. Some called her a hero. Others called her a fool who had interfered in matters that did not concern her. The Vrelnathi Dominion responded with fury. They sent diplomats to demand the cubs be returned immediately. They claimed Krathnix had been a criminal and a liar. They said the stolen data was fabricated, created to make them look bad. But their protests rang hollow when independent experts examined the files. The evidence was too detailed, too extensive to be fake. The genetic markers matched known Vrelnathi biology. The facility locations could be verified. Everything checked out. Other Vrelnathi began speaking up. Lower caste citizens who had lost cubs to mysterious disappearances. Warriors who had seen things they were told to ignore. Scientists who had been ordered to keep silent about research they found disturbing. The truth was spreading and it could not be contained. The hearing took place in a large chamber within the station. Representatives from multiple species attended. The Vrelnathi sent a delegation led by Ambassador Threknal, a high caste official who spoke with cold authority. He argued that the cubs were Dominion property, born to Dominion citizens on Dominion soil. They belonged to the state by law. He claimed Krathniks had stolen them along with classified research. He demanded they be returned for proper education and upbringing. Nicole stood before the council and told her story. She described finding the dying warrior and his starving children. She talked about the choice she made to share her rations. She explained the blood bond ceremony and her promise to Krathniks. "These are not property," she said firmly. "They are living beings with rights and feelings. They have names and personalities. They feel fear and love and pain. Returning them to a government that sees them as experimental subjects would be condemning them to death or worse." The council reviewed the evidence. They watched recordings from the crash site. They examined the stolen data. They heard testimony from multiple sources. The truth became undeniable. The Vrelnathi Dominion had been conducting illegal experiments on its own citizens. Hundreds of cubs had died. The program had been running for years with full knowledge of the highest levels of government. It was a systematic violation of galactic law regarding the treatment of juveniles. The council made their ruling. The 3 cubs would be granted asylum. Nicole Rivers would be recognized as their legal guardian. The Vrelnathi Dominion would face sanctions and investigations. The experimental program would be shut down immediately. Ambassador Threknal protested loudly. He claimed the council had no authority over internal Dominion affairs. He threatened to withdraw from galactic cooperation. But his words carried less weight now. The evidence had damaged the Dominion's reputation severely. Back in the Dominion itself, there was upheaval. Citizens were outraged by what had been done to their cubs. Lower caste Vrelnathi, who had suffered the most, began demanding change. Protests erupted in multiple cities. The ruling class found itself under pressure from its own people. Some Vrelnathi viewed Nicole's actions as an insult to their species. They saw it as a weak human presuming to judge Vrelnathi culture. But others, especially younger Vrelnathi and those from lower castes, saw something different. They saw strength and compassion. They saw courage in standing up for the vulnerable. A new movement began among young Vrelnathi warriors. They called themselves the Rivers Guard, named after Nicole. They argued that true strength included protecting those who could not protect themselves. They said honor meant doing what was right, not just what was tradition. 6 months passed. Nicole resigned from the military service to focus on raising her new family. She could not do both. The cubs needed constant attention and care. They were growing fast, already twice the size they had been when she first found them. She moved to a small human colony world called New Terra. The planet had open spaces and diverse wildlife. It was a good place for young predators to grow up. The local government gave her a large property on the edge of a forest. It had room for the cubs to run and hunt and learn. Life was not easy. The cubs ate enormous amounts of food. Their dietary needs were complex. Nicole had to learn Vrelnathi customs and traditions to raise them properly. She studied their language, their history, their cultural values. She wanted them to know where they came from. Goldie remained the most adventurous of the 3. She was always exploring, always curious about new things. She bonded strongly with Nicole, following her everywhere like a shadow. The 2 males, whom Nicole named Rex and Hunter at their request, were more cautious but equally loving. Teaching them about their heritage while raising them in human society created challenges. They were Vrelnathi, with all the instincts and needs of their species. But they were also being raised by a human, learning human values. They existed between 2 worlds. Some humans on New Terra were afraid of the growing predators in their community. They saw the claws and teeth and imagined danger. Nicole faced prejudice and suspicion. People crossed the street to avoid her and the cubs. Some suggested she should send them away to a Vrelnathi world, but others saw the truth. They saw 3 young beings who played and laughed and learned. They saw the gentle way the cubs interacted with smaller creatures. showing unexpected restraint. They saw how Goldie would carefully pick up injured birds and bring them to Nicole to heal. Captain Lisa Morgan visited one day. She had been following Nicole's progress with interest. She found her former sergeant in the backyard, watching the cubs practice hunting techniques on training dummies. "You started something," Lisa said, sitting down beside Nicole. "The Dominion is in chaos. The ruling caste is losing power. Reformers are taking control. They are shutting down all the secret programs and trying to make amends." Nicole watched Goldie leap at a dummy, her form perfect, her movements precise. "I just fed some hungry kids." "You did more than that," Lisa replied. "You challenged the idea that strength means domination. You showed that compassion can be powerful. People across the galaxy are talking about it. They call it the River's Accord." "The River's Accord?" Nicole asked. "The principle that true civilization means protecting the vulnerable regardless of species, that power should be used to defend, not to harm. It is becoming a movement. Multiple species are adopting it as policy." Nicole felt overwhelmed. She had never intended to start a political movement. She had just wanted to help some starving children. Rex tackled Hunter, and the two males rolled across the grass in a playful wrestling match. Goldie pounced on both of them, joining the game. Their laughter, if it could be called that, filled the air. "Do you regret it?" Lisa asked. "You gave up your career, your old life. This cannot be what you planned." Nicole thought about that question. She had indeed given up everything. Her military pension was smaller now. She faced discrimination and fear from people who did not understand. Raising 3 alien predators was exhausting work. Some days she wanted to quit, to walk away from the impossible responsibility. But then Goldie would chirp at her, that same sound she made the first time they met. Or Rex would bring her a flower he found trying to make her smile. Or Hunter would curl up beside her at night, trusting her to keep him safe.